Thank you for that introduction. And good morning, everybody, fellow leaders, speakers, our fantastic MC, Honorable Keynote. This has been an amazing event so far. I've been hopping on and off in between work meetings. Yeah, so if you can just pop a note to say hi, where you're from. Yeah, it will just, give us a sense of the breadth of this conference. If we were ever starting to think there were no firsts left, here we are connecting virtually for the very first self-distancing World ICT GirlCode Summit. It's an absolute honor and privilege to be part of this movement and to be amongst such great company. And yeah, I think it is inspirational with everything going on that we are still in a sort of, conference geared on inspiring others in a format that may very well become the new normal. So I had prepared a whole bunch of things to say about, coding and its applications, broadly, which I will get to, but I was so moved by Almarie's talk. It just really resonated with me. So I've just added in, a little bit around that, because I think there is a lot to be said about being vulnerable and about sharing your story in a way that doesn't seem perfect. I think, I've been to many events and I've heard speakers talk and I always leave and I think, oh, wow, like how, but the human side of it is, often lacking. So I think Almarie really sets the tone for, sharing more real stories about how life does happen. So before I get into my actual topic, I just want to share a little bit about myself, over and above that introduction, which is the piece that you hear and you think, oh, wow, how does all that happen? So I have worked for 15 years. I studied actuarial science, and in the time that I've been working, I've gotten married, I've had children, I've moved houses, I've still studied for, board exams. And it just happens, you kind of look back and you just keep going. And, because I've studied actuarial science, you would think that I'm quite analytical. Well, I am quite analytical by design, but by default, I realized that I wasn't applying this analytical mindset to my own life and to the sort of journey and those decisions. So at the end of 2018, I actually just decided I'd had a very busy year. So my youngest child is 3. He was born in February of 2017. And I actually, funny enough, got promoted while on maternity leave and then twice again when returning. And, it was just like Almarie says, you just say yes. You say yes, yes, yes. You become, you just become part of the system and you don't think about what it is actually that the end goal is. So at the end of 2018, I decided that I'll always have the capacity to work. I've got, the skill set, I've got the experience now, but I've got 3 kids that, I've always been a working mum. They're not getting any younger and their lives are kind of, ticking along. And even though I'm very keen on sort of maintaining work-life balance, there are things when you are working full-time and saying yes, 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 that you just lose track of. So I decided very deliberately to take a career break. And I did that, and a lot of people thought I was absolutely insane because, if you are progressing in your career and all these amazing things are happening, why would you decide to stop? And it was probably the most significant decision I have made in my career, because I thought I'd have a gap year, and the opportunities that arose because I wasn't in my normal state of mind were just phenomenal. I mean, I became acquainted with GirlCode as a result of being part of a startup. I was invited to speak at the UN Women Conference last year. It was a sort of Africa Girls Can Code camp. So just sort of shifting the mindset into, being the yes person and, trying to please others on your path. I mean, there is a place for that. And I would absolutely not advise taking a career break before you have built up the expertise and the sort of, financial stability as well. But I think that application of just sort of pausing. You know, there is nothing wrong, like Anne-Marie said, with saying no, or with just booking out time for yourself, with being deliberate with your choices. So I thought I'd just, you know, share that, because it is a bit more of the human side of me. Like I've said, you know, growing up in my sort of early working years, I'd attend conferences, and you just kind of leave wondering how, you know, what is the secret? There's no secret. We all figure out things as we go along. And oftentimes, you know, things have a perception of it being perfect and easy, but it's not. I also just want to quickly share a funny story. So I'm a bit OCD. So yesterday I said to T, can we have a bit of a dry run so I can figure out where I must look and what must happen? But it's so nice to see that, you know, some of the speakers have just kind of, you know, let you into their homes. I just think it's an amazing format for us to share our stories and to inspire and encourage in a way that can continue and is still possible. So if this is the new normal, I'm very excited to continue conferencing. Okay, so my talk was really structured around the applications of coding, both in softer skills and, you know, actual work experience. So for me, the key things that coding taught me throughout was how to solve problems. So when you study actuarial science, you have to do a lot of, you know, at the time it was just called computer literacy, but it wasn't really, because you learn SAS, you learn how to use big data in a way that helps you build your models and predict risk. And in that process, the key skill isn't about the code or the program or the job. It's about thinking in a way that allows you to solve a problem. So when you code, you have to think about the problem before the solution. Where in a lot of other fields, you have the solution in mind, and then you kind of go back. There's that, you know, constant feedback loop. So for me, you know, coding is an absolute life skill. I think it's one of the things that, because it allows you to think better in how you produce your program, it is, you know, arguably going to be one of the most important skills to learn. And it is already being built into curriculums from, you know, primary school onwards. And with coding, you also have to be very systematic and structured. And this is also a life skill. It shows you that you have to start, whether you know everything or not, you have to start. So if you ask somebody before they write a program, how many lines is it going to be? Like, you're not sure, but you start. And it also teaches you to work within certain constructs, but express yourself differently. So with any program, if it's, you know, whatever it is, C++, Java, Python, you have to know your syntax and the rules. But within that, you can apply your own creativity, and it can be your own. So that also for me is very much like life. You know, whatever the situation is, or the problem, or the job, or whatever it is, you'll always have the parameters in which you need to, you know, play or utilize or whatever, but you can make it your own. So I think for me, you know, coding is something that teaches you that in a very inherent way. It becomes part of how you function. So also what I've really learned about, you know, using code and maths is that it absolutely teaches you patience and resilience. So if anybody's ever had to debug an error where, you know, like now these days, you just sort of see it highlighted in the code. Back in the day, if you had an error that you had to debug, you often had to sit and work manually through lines of code. And when you find the problem, that's not enough. So that in itself teaches you the patience. But once you find the problem, you have to fix it. And if you don't fix it, your code will not run start to finish. And then, you know, you won't get the output that you wanted. So in the process of doing that, of having to go back and fix a problem, you also learn resilience, because it really teaches you that nothing is going to be perfect first time around. You will make a mistake and you can fix your mistake. So for me, those are two absolutely critical life skills. And we also spoke about resilience. It's, you know, one of the things that is almost downplayed to the extent where if you have, you know, not achieved something in the way that you intended to, you know, a lot of people just think, oh, it's not for me. But, you know, coding teaches you that's not true. You can start with the language and hate it. And then after practicing and practicing and practicing, it can become your favorite language. I mean, I remember, now this is really going to give away my age, but I remember learning Turbo Pascal, and I hated it. But it was the foundation for just about every other language that I've learned thus far. So it's the sort of cumulative knowledge and the way that you can actually develop yourself just by having that grit, that staying power. You know, coding also for me, it's one of the things that there's no better way of learning like cause and effect and consequences. The most common way to code most things, even in Excel, is not really coding, but is an if-then statement. I mean, that shows you that anything that's got an input has got an output. We can then evolve our thinking by, you know, an if-then-else statement, because it's not always binary. You can have a sort of input and output that has got more than one dependency. So coding in itself teaches you that. It teaches you how things always fit together and that there are consequences. I see some of the comments here. Hello from Cape Town, Letitia. Bianca, nice to see your guys' comments coming through. Thank you, keep sending. Okay, and then for me, you know, being a mom of 3, you really have to, you know, not all children are the same. So for me, learning how to code teaches you that you can apply different skills in, you know, different situations. So if I think of my 3 kids as 3 different languages, coding languages, fundamentally there are similarities. You know the framework, but there's these nuances within, you know, each thing that you need to apply practically. So just in terms of all the other skills I've listed, patience, resilience, consequence, grit, I think as a parent, being able to almost, you know, hit the pause button and take a step back and say, well, what are we trying to achieve here? I think it's a very unique way of thinking that because you've kind of been through it with different languages, you see that it is the same, but also, you know, quite different. It's been said a lot that data is the new gold. I'm not going to say oil because oil now has a negative trading price, but you can't extract any value from data unless you've used a model. And, you know, all models are built using a computer program, whether it's Excel or, you know, Access database, SAS, whatever it is, there's always a code behind the program. So whether you're in finance using complex models to, you know, value assets, or if you're an entrepreneur and you just want to understand who your client base is better, there are applications being used that obviously, you know, has got code behind them. So we often, you know, when you're in the hardcore coding, I say we think about front stack and middle stack and, you know, like there's all these different, but I mean, coding is absolutely everywhere. And I think at a time like this, where, you know, connecting virtually has become an imperative, if you think of companies that are retrenching versus those that are recruiting, you know, I saw a thing last night on LinkedIn that there are companies that are recruiting and the skills they are looking for, data scientists, developers, programmers. So that says a lot about the applications, you know, of just being able to build things that you can actually launch anywhere in the world through whatever format. So I think, you know, whatever it is that you use your coding for, there's an application for somebody else that extends far beyond what you would have even thought the application was. So for me, you know, coding is absolutely intrinsic in everything that you do. It's arguably one of the most important life skills you can learn, but it's not just about what you build. It's about what it actually teaches you as a rounded human being. Cool, so that's me. I'm gonna jump to questions unless, okay, I can't see all. I'm just gonna have a